my power to make your life miserable until you stop doing what you're doing.
I've never seen this happen before in Australia.
There has been ongoing conflict.
They're a YouTube phenomenon.
It was game over.
This is the future of Australian hip-hop, right here.
And I am here for it!
Folks, welcome to Cordkillers Reckoning. The world of entertainment has turned upside down, and we're just trying to find out in this hellscape how to watch what we want, where we want, whenever we want. Where's the good stuff, Brian?
Well, I could tell one bit of good stuff is in the scene of Australian hip-hop. I've been following this scene for 5 years now, and I always loved how, like, the beats were a little bit slower, the rhymes were a little bit more clever. It felt like late 90s, and now I guess they're emulating the part where everybody's becoming a criminal. Is that what this is about, Bryce?
Well, in fact, I think that's what they're trying to work against. So this is a trailer for 1-4, a Netflix documentary feature about the Australian drill rap group 1-4. And I guess it is very 90s in the sense of like hip hop as like this catalyst of violence in our cities. I think now it's time for them to get on that. That's streaming on Netflix October 26th. It looks interesting.
Yeah, sometimes Australia is
in Australia.
Yeah, and sometimes Australia is ahead of us. Like when they bring us Crocodile Dundee, sometimes we're ahead of them, where we bring them violence associated with hip hop.
I think they had violence to begin with, but
Oh yeah, no, I was in Sydney once, and I was carrying a flat white, and this person just ran into me, and I spilled it.
oh my god,
That's right.
how rude! How rude!
Yeah, didn't even apologize.
What?
Left no tip.
Yeah, it was also my sister, but you know.
She should know better. She should know better, Tom.
Yeah. But the police wouldn't do anything about it. Yeah. All right. Let's move off on a supply run.
Supply run.
The chords have fallen, my friends. So while we will tell you later in the show about things like Comcast and Spectrum teaming up on a streaming box with fast services, or DirecTV picking a fight with Max's CNN stream, those are the last rumblings of a dying battle of the past. The future for us Cordkillers is selection. How do we find the stuff? So on our supply run this episode, we found this and figured we should all take a look. What is this? We brought it back. Likewise is one of the many sites that want to help you find what to watch next. Likewise is interesting that they also throw in books and podcasts in the recommendation engine, not just TV and movies. They have launched what they say is a large language model powered chatbot named Pix. So it's using OpenAI's GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 trained on Likewise's own customer data. So it's a legit large language model. It's from OpenAI. So if you're familiar with ChatGPT, this is the same kind of technology that powers ChatGPT. You can chat on the web. You can chat through Likewise's Pix app. You can even email and text it and carry on your conversation with it that way, which I thought was an interesting twist. And supposedly it will learn your preferences the more you interact with it, and then be able to make personalized recommendations. It can also then proactively let you know when a new show it thinks you like arrives and which service carries it. Pix is free. They're doing an ad-supported thing, so you don't have to subscribe or anything. You do have to put up with some ads, though. We've all tried it out. Brian, how is your experience with Pix, which I know isn't exactly what you want, but it's kind of a step towards what you've been talking about with a recommendation engine?
Yeah, well, specifically, if there's one thing better than it being easy to hunt down, what I'm looking for, then a second place would be a pseudo-intelligent entity being able to make good recommendations. Unfortunately, at about every question, I bumped into the limits of its knowledge. It was very quick to tell me, well, I don't know that. And I don't know if that's just me being spoiled by searching for things or being spoiled by playing around with ChatGPT 4. But I ended up doing kind of an A/B analysis where I had a conversation with Pix that ended up most of the conversations were, I don't know about that. I'm just a large language model. So I could it wouldn't tell me what I thought would be simple questions like, who was the main villain of the Righteous Gemstones season 3? And it's like, well, I don't know. I'm just here to recommend things. And then I said, I tried, I'm watching a lot of Taika Waititi stuff. What should I watch? And it listed 5 of them. And I was like, I've seen all of those except for those 2. Can you suggest more? And then it suggested a bunch of things that weren't Taika Waititi. It's as though it forgot all of that. Then I would ask, like, can we talk about podcasts or comic books, or like the limits of its knowledge were hard, and it was just a bummer. It felt a little bit retro and slow. I had approximately, I cut and pasted the exact same questions into just regular old ChatGPT 4, even with its limitation at its cutoff date of September 2021. And it was able to intuit much, much more. Like when I was able to say, I've seen all those Taika Waititi movies, what else you got? It knew that we were still talking about Taika Waititi and didn't just default into other things in a similar genre. And then likewise, I was able to move the conversation into, She-Hulk talking about the comics versus the show or whatever. So I think that this is a good idea. It just felt like the data set that it had to work with was just too small. Because we know the engine works, but it's just the data set was extremely limited.
Yeah, if people don't understand that, OpenAI's ChatGPT has used basically the entire web as its data set. So it has a cutoff date, like Brian mentioned, but it can draw from a much vaster amount of knowledge. Whereas what Likewise says it did is that it took the same model that runs ChatGPT, but trained it just on its own data from its customers. So it's more limited in what data it was trained on, and therefore how it's going to respond. Bryce, did you try it?
I did, and I also had a pretty mediocre experience with it. I tried to use it a little more, have they suggested, like, hey, give me some recommendations. The first one came back okay, right? I said, can you give me some comedies on Netflix? I like alternative and indie comedy, not mainstream stuff. And it gave me a decent list: BoJack Horseman, Master of None, End of the World, The Kaminsky Method, Lady Dino, a bunch of good stuff that I had actually seen before. But it definitely seemed like, okay, I asked it that, and it gave me Netflix's category of indie comedies and just showed me the most popular ones. So then I asked it, okay, look, it's got podcasts and other things. So I said, okay, can you give me a good gay podcast that is not about pop culture? And it does not have the data to answer that question. It gave me...
It said, no, I can't, sorry.
Well, it gave me 3 recommendations that were not right. All of them were pop culture.
I had similar...
And one of them was music.
I had similar experiences to both of you, which is I said, hey, I'm in the middle of watching Moving on Hulu, and I just finished King the Land. Can you recommend some other K-dramas? And it gave me a decent list, and I was like, yeah, I've seen all those. Can you tell me more? Then it gave me another list, and I was like, yep, seen all those too. So they weren't bad recommendations. It just didn't know enough about me. So I'll be a little forgiving. Like, okay, as you learn, if I were to use this all the time, it would know better. But then the third time is like, it really literally said like, yeah, sorry, I'm out of ideas. That's all I got.
It's pretty
like, okay. There's a lot more stuff out there that you should know about.
It's pretty clear that what it's doing, like the ChatGPT side of it, is fine. Like it seems like it's doing a good job of like taking what you're asking for and figuring it out what filters and tags you want. But it ends up being really, really inelegant. I asked for good true crime docs on Hulu, and it gave 3 out of the 5 it gave me were not documentaries. They were based on a true story, but they were not even documentaries. I just asked it here, can you give me some true crimes from 2009? And what it gave me is a list of true crime things and things from 2009. So I wish it just, you know what? The best version of this would just be giving me all of those buttons and just let me click those buttons. Because what it's doing now is not, it's promising to give me something that it is not able to deliver.
Oh, you know what?
And the thing
right-
to remember here too is that the way these large language models work, they're just predicting words that would likely come next. A lot of us, I think, have the idea that they're looking at a database and pulling data, which they are not. Large language models are just very good based on the data they've been trained on to predict what words come next. The fewer words and word orders you have given it to train on, I'm way oversimplifying here, but the worse it's going to be at that. And I think that's what we're seeing here is that because they limited it to their own data set to train on, it's just not as good at stringing words together, and it really doesn't ever know anything.
Well, and on top of that, like one of the functions of it, it's like there's first discovering new content, then there's asking where can I go see it, and we have leaned on Just Watch because they get some kind of affiliate code by correctly telling you where to go. This is available at this place. That's one thing I forgot to play with on that. I wonder, Bryce, if you could say like where can I see what we do in the shadows and see if it gets the answer right or something like that.
Well, I can ask it, but I think what it's going to do is it's going to look up what we do in the shadows, and I'm going to look at the little icon here that says Max.
Yeah. But
which isn't bad. I mean, at least you get the info, but it's
But then at that point, you could have just Googled it, and Google would have told you that same thing. Well, let's see.
I feel like the result here for folks, the takeaway is if you have access to ChatGPT, just use that. It's a decent recommendation engine, better than Likewise has.
Well, especially if it's anything, pre-2021, if you want to, say, who was that actor that was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind? He had some other movie where he was like a music teacher. What was that? Like, I feel like ChatGPT is going to nail it and bring you Mr. Holland's opus.
Well, here's
if you go to Bing, I believe the date limit doesn't apply.
Right,
so
they have
use
the browse.
ChatGPT through Bing and avoid that. And the same for Bard. You could do the Bard thing on Google, but you have to opt into it then.
I asked the Pix what streaming service is What We Do in the Shadows streaming on. It says What We Do in the Shadows is currently streaming on iTunes, Fubo TV, FX Networks, Google Play, Hulu, Spectrum On Demand, and Vudu, which I guess is right.
I could buy it on Vudu.
Yeah, I guess I would have said Hulu first because that's where I would consider the primary streaming source of.
Yeah.
No, it's it's a good. You know what? We brought this back on our supply run. It's a little tarnished. Maybe if we use it more, like maybe if it learned more about us, it would work a little better. But it's fairly limited.
Yeah.
But it is a harbinger of something that we've wanted.
And we'll see more swings at this, I have a feeling.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still waiting for after everyone's had a taste of ChatGPT and Bard and Bing, all of a sudden, Siri seems a little less bright, Alexa seems a little less bright, and it'll be interesting to see people playing catch up to make all of their assistants a little smarter.
Yeah, I would think that we'll see lots of folks trying this. And if you want us to continue to monitor for that and tell you about them, you should become a patron.
Oh, yeah. By the way, you remember we had a terrible situation where Ander wasn't able to go to the requested $1.63 amount. He got his issue fixed, and then he upped it to $2 per episode. So kudos to Ander for that, man. Look, you guys keep us loud, live, and independent. We are growing so many things. We have some new surprises for you. Why don't you become a patron and join us for our After Talk segment, exclusive for our paying customers. And we love you guys. patreon.com/Cordkillers.
Let's start the search party. All right, folks, this is where we talk about the things that we have been looking at, things that we could look at. And I want to start with one that I finished. The Ahsoka finale happened last week. And my summary, and I want to talk about this more in After Talk for the patrons, but my summary, Brian, is that if you are a fan of Star Wars Rebels, You will likely love this. If you are a fan of the original Star Wars trilogy, episodes 4, 5, and 6, you'll probably find a lot to like in here. They tried to capture that sense, that used universe feel, and they did a really good job. If you are looking for the next Andor, you will be disappointed. This is not that.
Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted because while I didn't fall into the Rebels story, I do know that there were some Grand Admiral Thrawn in there, and if there's any of that, I'd be interested in it. But
there is Thrawn. It's a minor spoiler. I think it's been well known on the internet that he showed up. He had a little bit of a punch. I'm not sure if that was a style choice or just the actor.
Okay, all right. We'll save the detailed spoilering for the after talk.
Yeah, but if what you want to know is how this new timeline is treating all of that, there's a lot here. If you're a Clone Wars fan, even if you didn't watch Rebels, there's some nice stuff in there for you there. But mostly it's like, oh, this is live action Rebels, basically, just carried on, farther down the line from the time. Like a Star Wars Rebels happens before the fall of the Empire. Ahsoka happens after the fall of the Empire. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed it, but I'm not out there raving everybody needs to see it. Certain people absolutely should see it. I guess that's where I'd put it.
Yeah. All right.
Meanwhile, we continue to document the return of shows after the writer's strike. We don't have the actor's strike resolved yet. I kind of thought we'd be a little farther along in resolving the actor's strike at this point, but we are not. So those shows that operate on what's called the television code are no longer struck. They were never struck by the actors. They were only struck by the writers. So Saturday Night Live is returning for its 49th season on October 14th. Ice Spice will be the musical guest. And Pete Davidson, who was supposed to host before Saturday Night Live had to stop producing, will host this return for the 49th season. There's also a couple of minor cast changes as we technically are just beginning a brand new season of Saturday Night Live. But it is interesting to see that actors can appear on these. I don't think they could promote any work they're striking, but they could appear on these because it's a different agreement.
Yeah, I spent an hour listening to I think it's script notes from Craig Manzin.
Oh yeah,
the guy who did Chernobyl and The Last of Us, and he was positively giddy. He did a kind of a breakdown of what he perceived to be big wins for the writers and the things that they had to concede. It's a fascinating podcast if you want to hear kind of from a boots on the ground perspective how the writers are feeling, or at least that writer.
Oh, cool. And then, as far as returning stuff, we're going to get whatever was in the bank already, especially because they can now do written material, but they're not shooting anything until they resolve the actor strike. So there's still going to be a little bit of a gap at some point down the line, right? There's a lot of stuff in the pipeline that they're emptying out now. Do you have any sense, Brian? Because I certainly don't, about when that actor strike might resolve. I thought we'd be getting signs that it was resolving soon. I didn't think it'd be resolved by now, but I feel like the signs are a little more pessimistic than I would have guessed.
I would have thought that the two would collapse almost simultaneously, like once they got what they wanted. So it may be that there's some holdouts, but on the writer's side, I was really struck by the emphatic encouragement of like, hey, let's make Hollywood proud with our best work now that we're going back to work. And hopefully the SAG will feel the same way.
All right. Searching around for some new stuff to watch. Keep an eye on this one. Developer CD Projekt Red announced it is in the earliest stages of working with anonymous content, folks that brought you Mr. Robot, for example, to develop a live action TV show or movie based on Cyberpunk 2077. It seems like it's working with the TV side of Anonymous. They also have a film side. But the decision of whether it will be a TV show or movie has not been announced. So they may be working with the TV side now to explore the idea. And if they decide it's better as a movie, they might switch.
That's so wild to have watched, and I have very little hands-on experience, but by reputation in the 80s, the Cyberpunk role-playing game was deeply beloved. The works by William Gibson were deeply beloved. Snow Crash, deeply beloved. And then to see that made, supposed to be made flesh in the form of the video game Cyberpunk, only it was so buggy as to be unplayable, and it was largely panned. And then all of a sudden, it was an anime, right, Bryce?
Yes, and Edge Runners, Cyberpunk Edge Runners, which is a good show on Netflix. And, the video game, they've had this big update. They've fixed it, whatever. So
it's generally praised now.
Yeah, now it's... Now, 3 years later, they fixed it. Now the game's good.
But it's wild to see something try to move into a new format, be reviled, and now beloved, and have real momentum where it's got, to me, big names associated with it.
Yeah. Apple TV Plus will once again let non-subscribers stream the Charlie Brown holiday specials. When Apple got the rights to these years ago, folks screamed because they weren't going to be able to watch them on broadcast TV anymore, even though most of those people complaining never watched them on broadcast TV. They just didn't like the idea that they couldn't. For a couple of years, Apple let PBS in the United States simulcast them. It does not appear that is happening. It appears that the only way you can get them is streaming them through the Apple TV app, but you won't have to be a subscriber. You don't have to pay for Apple TV Plus. You just need the Apple TV app.
That's that's a pretty clever Trojan horse, where it's like, it's a very small ask and it's not a very intrusive app, but once you've experienced it, just being in that ecosystem, I can understand people saying, well, I don't know, I'd kind of like to finally watch that Ted Lasso I've been hearing about or whatever.
Yeah, and if I'm correct, I haven't double checked this in a while, but I think they give you a lot of free first episodes if you're not a subscriber on Apple TV's app.
I've seen a few of those.
Yeah. So the pathway is come for the Charlie Brown special, and then when you're done, it goes, hey, you want to watch the first episode of Foundation, Ted Lasso, whatever, and then you do, and it's like, want to watch episode 2? It's only $4.99 a month or whatever. Only Murders in the Building ended season 3 on a cliffhanger and then immediately announced a 4th season has been improved, which, would have been pretty upsetting to folks if they had ended on a cliffhanger and said, nope, it's been canceled. But, good news. It was not. It is going to get a 4th season. You have any interest in this, Brian? I know I'm a big fan. I always enjoy watching it.
I'm getting more and more curious. It's like, it's a steady drumbeat of people just saying, yeah, it seems like you'd like it a lot. Seems like you'd really like it.
It's got good comedy because it's Steve Martin and Martin Short. It's got the cozy mystery thing, which I don't get the sense that you hate it, but it's also not like right up your alley the way it is with me and Death in Paradise and everything. It also is very New York, which to me is fun because I'm familiar with New York. My wife lived there for a month, and I got to experience a little tiny taste of what it's like to live in New York. And so I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's very New York. But I don't expect that's a thing that really would be a positive for you.
It wouldn't be a negative.
New York City.
But I do find it a curious aspect. I read an article once about like where people live in New York. They kind of don't care where they live because they perceive that they live in the entire city of New York. It's sort of like being on a cruise ship. It's like, whatever, you have a cabin, but the ship is your ship.
Yeah. ATL John Boy has a great remark in the chat. Says, I love this show. Probably best show in decades that isn't cops, lawyers, superheroes. And there are some cops in it because it's a murder mystery, but the cops are very ancillary, right? The murder solving is all done by our amateur sleuths, our main characters. So that's a good point. I hadn't thought about it from the sense of it's not NCIS or CSI, it's not Marvel, it's not DC, and yet it's a fun, compelling story.
Yeah.
Speaking of fun, compelling stories, Netflix is bringing back Castlevania Nocturne for a 2nd season.
Wait, the first one's already out?
Yep.
Yeah, it came out recently.
And have you watched it, Bryce?
I haven't. I did fall off of the Castlevania the last Castlevania series. But if this is a new series, then I guess that's a chance to jump in. That makes sense why they would keep doing all of these spin-offs of, hey, you fell off, but we got a new thing, come back in, right? Like they did that with Narcos and Narcos Mexico. I could see them doing more of that. I'll check it out. Are you guys interested in the Castlevania series?
You have said many, many nice things about it, but I just don't have the affection for that brand.
I would say you don't. At least the first 2 seasons that I watched of just Castlevania, you don't really need to know the game at all. I love that. The first episode of Castlevania is great because it's not a spoiler. It's the first episode, but they make you really understand why Dracula's probably got a good few reasons to kill all the humans.
Okay, good motivation to get started. That's good. As friends of Veronica Belmont, I think we're always interested in stories about Belmonts. I don't know. The way I think about things now is I have a variable amount of time for shows, right? Depending on my circumstances. And I would say Castlevania Nocturne on my priority list is probably in the upper 40% of shows.
Okay, that's up there. That's on a good.
So
slow
when
day.
I have a lot of time, should that happen, then yeah, it'll probably make the cut, and I'll give it a shot.
Come on, COVID.
The Castlevania Nocturne producers are cheering for COVID. All right, let's see what kind of buried treasure we found.
Most people want to know why they suddenly got rich.
Buried treasure.
Now, folks, we're going to talk about shows here in a non-spoilery way, but if you want to get more of that water cooler type talk that we do, you'll want to become a patron and get After Talk. We have a big After Talk coming. We're going to talk about Our Flag Means Death, a little bit about What We Do in the Shadows, and a little bit more about Ahsoka. But I want to mention the first episode of Loki as the thing that is my buried treasure for the week. It was not very buried. Everybody knows about Loki. But if you were holding off, if you were like, I want to hear a little bit about whether it's good or not, the thing I loved about the second season of Loki is it hits the ground running. There is no, let's retrench and remind everyone through narrative what's going on. They do it previously on, and then you're off to the races. Like, it is action-packed. And one of the fastest Disney watches that I've experienced in a long time. I was like, wait, it's over already? Like it was just breakneck pace through that first episode.
And so they're doing these weekly, right? They're not doing them in batches?
That's correct. Yeah. And I think there's only 6 of them. So they limited the amount of time that they've got to tell the story.
Good.
Yes.
Good.
Agreed. So yeah, if you liked season 1 of Loki, but you were like on the fence, do I want to try another one? Is it going to be as good? So far, so good. Episode 1. And we're dealing with a fairly complex backstory. They have a pretty thick previously on that reminded me of some things that were essential to the plot that I forgot. Apparently, they're going to really explain all the alternate universe stuff in Marvel very well. And so I'm looking forward to that too.
And I don't need to have watched Quantumania or seen the other Kang stuff. Okay.
Nah. I mean, like all the Marvel stuff, there are a couple of bits that you'll have, like, you'll feel a little more knowledgeable if you've seen those. But yeah, you could read the Wikipedia summary and be just as good.
Right on. What about you, Bryce? What are you watching?
I had the parents over this week, and the thing that we really got caught up on a little bit was The Other Two. Have you guys heard of The Other Two on Max?
No, I haven't.
This is a comedy from Broadway video, all the Lorne Michaels SNL stuff. It's, what are their names? Helena York and Drew Tarver as the 2 adult siblings of a child star. And so it follows them as they are trying to have full adult lives while their young 14-year-old brother is a Justin Bieber type star. It is a really easy watch. It's really funny, and I think it does a good job of having really serious, having good emotional moments for being a sitcom. You know, you follow the sister, and she kind of doesn't know what she wants to do with her love life and her job, and then ends up finding a job, but then is that affecting her love life? And then the brother Carrie has kind of the opposite. He's trying to make it as an actor, and as he's getting more work, then it's finding tough to settle into what he wants. It's really good. It is over. They canceled it, but but we're in the middle of the second season, and it's still very good. Molly Shannon is in it, and she's great. Ken Marino is in it, and he's great as well. Big recommendation for the other two.
I would imagine there's lots of themes of all of those asymmetrical, like Kieran McCulkin versus, or Donnie Wahlberg versus that kind of stuff.
It's not so much that, because it's not like the next most popular person in the family is also really popular. You know, there's a pretty big gulf there. But I think it does. I think it's interesting and does a good job without relying too much on typical sitcom tropes.
Maybe more like Donnie Wahlberg 10 years ago.
Yeah. So that's a little pick for me. Brian, what about you? What are you going to watch?
Oh my gosh, it's been misery. I've had to wait for months until my daughter came home from college, but we binged in 2 days all of season 2 of The After Party. Oh boy, is it good! Oh boy, is it good!
Yeah.
We had
even that middle part.
Even the middle part, because that moment, like we couldn't end one episode without starting the next one and just placing our bets as to what kind of story they were going to tell. Then once we found out what it was, we finally felt like we could pause it and take a break. I think I loved this one even more than season 1.
Wow.
And I had made a hard prediction to my children based on the way season 1 ended. They were very upset, and I said, don't worry, we're going to see this character again. It's going to be in a scene like this. And sure enough, like episode 5, there was a nod to that scene, and everyone was like, Dad was right. It was I just enjoy it so much. It's so clever and playful with all the cinematic tropes. I like it.
There are a few episodes that just disappointed me in that second season, but I think it does pick up by the end. I think it starts pretty strong, and I think it ends really strong.
Yeah.
You know, the mother's story where she's, you know, the old diva, that was so good.
Being gaslit and
yeah. But I didn't like the Ken Jeong one. I didn't think that was clever. I did not like the social media thing.
I thought
that was so weak. That was so weak.
I liked it. I liked it because it was reminiscent of Who Drew the Dicks?
American Vandal.
Yes, it reminded me of American Vandal, and that made me very happy.
And as I mentioned, Our Flag Means Death, right? You've finished all 3. I have also finished all 3, so we'll be talking about those more on After Talk. But any non-spoilery things you want to mention about that, Brian?
Boy, those first 2 episodes, I'm so glad that they released them in groups of 3, because those first 2 episodes were dark.
Yeah,
they
right.
were dark.
It's interesting. I was watching them going like, ooh, this is not nearly as fun. But I also wasn't stopping. I watched all 3 in a row. And yes, finally, it started to lighten up a little in episode 3. Bryce, what should we be on the lookout for?
Hey, I got a pick here from my mom. What?
My mom.
This is a 3-part true crime documentary on HBO called Savior Complex. It talks about the story of Renee Bach and Serving His Children, an organization she grew in Uganda that started off with good intentions to feed needy people, and then kind of evolved into trying to solve medical issues, becoming a medical center, and they were not at all trained to treat people at all. She was not a doctor. It was kind of tough. We watched the first episode the other night, and I think they do a good job of explaining, like, well, how do you get into that case, right? Like, if you grow up evangelical and you really want to do service for humanity, then okay, yeah, go pass out beans and rice, whatever. But then as you take on more and more responsibility of housing people, sheltering people, curing people, you can see how it snowballs and gets too large. And I'm excited to see what the resolution is to this, because it sounds like she got into some pretty hot water, and I would not want to be in that hot water of taking care of children. I already wouldn't want to take care of one children, let alone hundreds of them.
Yeah, Bryce is the one where it says you could save just one child, and Bryce is like, too many.
Can we make it 0?
Wow.
Oh, sorry. That's a 3-part doc series on HBO, Savior Complex. It's on HBO Max, and now this came out back in September, but it looks pretty interesting. If you got something we should be on the lookout for, please email it to us, cordkillers@gmail.com.
Hey, big thanks to Doghouse Systems for providing the machines upon which Cordkillers runs. If you like how we run and you would like to run just as well, get yourself a Doghouse System. You can go to doghousesystems.com/rogue and get a free SSD when you do. Brian, what have you been doing with computers these days?
You know what? I've been using them to be in constant contact with our brand new artist developing our brand new flagship holiday extravaganza puzzle box. It's called the Vox Tempest, and I could not be more proud of this. It is a year-long ARG that begins in a puzzle box with surprising stuff inside. As usual, we put a sci-fi premium deck of cards in there. We also put a precious totem. It is an ingot that is made from earth materials from this very property, and a little thing called meteorites. We have to buy meteorites for this.
Wow.
And what's amazing is they're slightly magnetic because of the meteorites, and from the way that the ingot is created, they fluoresce. So they're magical. Each individual one is individually numbered. There are clues in the alien scripts all around this thing. This is going to be one for the ages. It's available now. We are limited, so if you want to get one for the holidays, head on over to scamstuff.com. That's scamstuff.com, gear for the modern rogue, and get one while you can. You'll see that the premium edition is like signed and $200, but you could get one for less, only $169.99.
Hey, $200. Give us $200.
Or get the signed one. But the point is, it's going to be something that everybody is going to get hands on with, and the puzzles are very, very good.
Fantastic. Folks, go check it out now. As the day ends in the post-apocalyptic streaming landscape, you will always find us scanning the horizon.
Send a scanning to aboard.
Scanning the horizon!
I love this story so much. It's so perfect. It's like they did it for us. Like, oh, you've done Cordkillers Reckoning? Here, we will show the results of the end of this war on cords. Comcast and Charter have begun teaming up on their Zumo Streambox. So Comcast, the monopolistic cable provider in one part of the United States, Spectrum, the brand that Charter runs as a monopolistic provider in another part of the United States, combining forces with Comcast-owned FAST service, the free ad-supported service Zumo, to sell cable subscribers a streaming box. If you're like, this sounds familiar, we talked about the plans for this back in April. It's a set-top box that can stream the normal streaming apps. So it's got Netflix, Disney Plus, Max, etc. But Zumo's FAST service is the front end. So you get the guide that has all of Zumo's free ad-supported streaming channels, as well as your cable company's app. So you see live TV the minute you turn it on. If you're not a subscriber to cable and you get this thing, you'll just see Zumo. If you are a subscriber to cable TV, you'll see Zumo and all of your regular cable channels. Spectrum customers can get it now for $60 or $5 a month, and that would be for the cable subscribers. Comcast Xfinity Internet customers are getting the opportunity to bundle it in soon. That hasn't started yet, but it's about to. So that's the one where you wouldn't necessarily have Xfinity cable. If you do, that'll show up. If you don't, it would just be the Zumo service.
I love that we're approaching the day that will it'll be easier to count the holdouts who still have traditional cable boxes or satellite boxes, and that everything else is just streaming like this.
And at what point does someone who's a Comcast subscriber say, "Oh yeah, I still have cable TV," but they don't? They just have this with the Zumo thing, right?
Well, and that's one of the themes that we've been talking about is like how it's going to go. But meanwhile, one familiar thing is prices are going up. Warner Brothers Discovery announced that it's going to raise the price for the ad-free version of Discovery Plus from $6.99 a month to $8.99. Its ad-supported version will remain $4.99 a month. And the Wall Street Journal sources say Netflix plans to raise the prices of its ad-free services a few months after the actor strike is resolved, whenever that is. It'll likely raise prices in the U.S. and Canada first.
Yeah, everything's going up. Everything's getting more expensive. I thought I'd left these days behind when I left my teens, but sadly, no. Bryce, I know you made a note in our document that you're shocked that Discovery Plus still exists separately from Max.
We spent so much time talking about Max and what's going to happen to HBO Now and HBO Go and all this. And they're still offering Discovery Plus as a separate thing, even though didn't they move all of that into Max?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't get it. It must just be a lower price option for them to have.
I'm going to guess, this is totally a guess, that they ran the numbers and said, because we have to keep the Max price high, $15 a month, $10 a month with ads, we will not see people move from Discovery Plus to Max in large enough numbers just to get the Discovery Plus stuff, that it makes sense to continue to provide Discovery Plus on its own for now. And the ad-supported version staying at $4.99 a month makes me think that it's possible down the road that Discovery Plus just becomes an ad-supported service, and they keep raising the ad-free service to the point where, like, you might as well just get Max at this point.
And Discovery is one of those properties where when you go into a sports bar, there often is just one channel that is just playing Discovery at all times. So it might be that there are households where that's just the on-screen thing at all times. That's the waterfall.
They just run the pretty channel.
Yeah.
You know, yeah. We may have noted how significant it was that CNN Max, the live TV news service that is inside the Max app now, had a lot of the same programs you can get on the cable version of CNN. Since in the past, cable services like Comcast and Spectrum have objected to that amount of rebroadcast of a channel without a cable subscription. Well, DirecTV noted that too. DirecTV sent a note to Warner Brothers Discovery saying that CNN Max risks violating its carriage agreements. Side note, AT&T is starting to explore options for what to do with the 70% stake in DirecTV that it still owns. Starting in August next year, it could sell its stake entirely. So DirecTV may be taking this move because it's feeling the pinch a little more than the others.
So if and when this escalates, what do you think that turns into?
I don't know. That's fascinating. That's a fascinating question, right? Is like they didn't send a note saying you need to stop, which is definitely what would have happened 10 years ago, right? Comcast, Charter, all of them would have been like, this violates our agreements. You have to cease immediately. They sent a note going like, I don't know, y'all. Feels like this violates our agreement, but what do you want to do? Like, it feels like maybe they're trying to get a rate increase or something else out of Warner Brothers Discovery, because otherwise they would have just sent a cease and desist, don't you think?
Yeah, well, and it almost feels like a soft, gilded invitation to the bargaining table. Like, hey, will you give me a call? Because, we're just kind of feeling this way about what you're doing.
And, if you knocked a couple of points off of this agreement, then maybe we could see our way clear and not to worry about it, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. One way to differentiate your streaming service is to go ultra high quality. That's what Sony's doing with Sony Pictures Core for the PS4 and PS5. It offers up to 2,000 movies for sale or rent with HDR at 80 megabits, similar to what you would get on disc. I assume that's Blu-ray, and much higher than the bit rates for Netflix, Max, or even Vudu. And Sony says some Sony films will come to the service first. That seems astute because we've talked for a long time about how the highest quality presentation you could get would be on a Blu-ray disc, right?
Yeah, and I think it's really smart for Sony because I wondered when they just pulled all of their video and TV services, which Microsoft did as well on the Xbox, and just said, "Hey, do you want that stuff? We have apps from the other services." Especially in Sony's case, they have Sony Pictures Entertainment. You think they could come up with a thing like this, and guess what? They did. And smart to say, we can compete on quality. We can compete on access with our own stuff in a way that these others can't. Otherwise, we're still operating an app store, so we're good with that.
Well, and keep in mind also that this is going to be proprietary hardware locked with PS4 and PS5,
right?
Which means that they're going to be able to buffer or download the entire thing, so it's running off of a hard drive.
So I think when I think we've talked about this service before because it was built into Sony Bravia TVs.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And this is a new launch of it that is only on PS4 and PS5. So it's a re-stickering, but also this version of it is only on the PlayStations. I'm not sure what's happening to the version that's on Bravia. Maybe it's not significantly different. So maybe it's a distinction without a difference. I don't know.
I think it's also smart. If I read this right, they're also giving free, media within this app to the PlayStation Plus Game Pass subscribers. Right. And that is A, very easy to add value to those plans, and B, could potentially bootstrap whatever the service is, whether it becomes a fast sort of thing or they keep it as a PONO style high bitrate service.
Right. And finally, Roku's next round of software updates will soon add more features to make it easier to find the things you want to watch. So they're right there with us. Like, yeah, your priority is how do I find the good stuff? So they're making the OS do that. You'll be able to favorite sports teams, so you'll find their games easier. It's one of the things on Apple TV that I rely on. You get notified when they're live. Roku's going to have that. Roku's own fast service, the Roku channel stuff, will let you personalize the order of channels in the guide. So you can put your favorites up at the top. And its What to Watch segment will have new, more specific categories for you. Color settings, previously only available in the Roku app, will now be available directly on the TVs that run Roku OS and in the box. And Roku will add support for Google Photos. So if you want to add Google Photos as a screensaver, things like that, you can do it in the OS. All of that and more coming to Roku OS 12.5, arriving first in the United States over the next few weeks.
Nice.
Well, Brian, I believe we have but one thing left to do, and that's listen to the chatter.
You
got mail. Andrew wrote, Killers. I assume you mentioned the FCC's ruling on cable card when it happened in late 2020. I couldn't find a show where you mentioned it. But as a reminder, in late 2020, the FCC ruled that cable companies were no longer required to support cable cards, the cards that make TiVo and other user-owner set-top boxes work with cable. I have a TiVo and wanted to get a second cable card for a new HD Home Run Prime. This has proven to be impossible in my area. My original cable company was WOW, Wide Open West, but my service was sold to RCN, who rebranded it to Astound. I've been told the old WOW system my house is connected to is not compatible with Astound cable cards, a Motorola system versus a Cisco system. So my current card works, but I can't get a new one. On top of that, they told me they plan to kill off the entire old cable system and replace everything with IP set-top boxes. So every customer will need new set-top boxes. But they have no problem selling me and charging me for a card I couldn't use. I thought this was an interesting story and wanted to share. Do you think more cable companies will start to shut down their old coax systems and move to 100% IPTV? Your patron, Andrew. P.S. This is in the Chicago area. And yes, I know I'm crazy for still having TiVo, Netflix, DVDs, and cable TV.
I hate to be so blunt, but yeah, I think that is going to be the go-to move. And because increasingly, 10 years ago, that would have been suicidal because people only had one internet provider. But now that people are getting, their 5G LTE, their Starlinks, their all different types of services, it would make sense and it would simplify things. And I think that is something that these companies want to do.
Yeah, and Andrew, it sounds like you're very self-aware that you are in a smaller and possibly diminishing group of people who want this. So I think you know where this is headed, and yeah, it sucks. It sucks when you've got a system and that system is no longer supported as they move on to a new system. But the good news is you have a lot of other choices, and I'd refer back to the Tableau that we talked about last week that can do DVRs for fast services. I know it's not a direct replacement. I'm not suggesting it is in any way, but there's a lot of new, interesting things to look at. It's always a pain to have to adapt your old system to the new system because stuff never matches up entirely. But yeah, sadly, I have to agree with Brian. Like this is going to get less and less supported, and I think more companies are just going to start delivering stuff over IP because the internet has become more like electricity than cable ever was. It just powers things in your house. It's your smart home. It's your smart assistant. It turns on your lights. It does your security system. It provides your television. The internet is just the everything wire now, and I don't think that's going away.
For those of you at home who have never lived the experience, there's nothing sweeter than hearing Tom Merritt say the words, "Sadly, I have to agree with Brian on this."
I'm not sad that I have to agree with you. I'm sad for Andrew.
I know
that I also have to say.
But it makes it even better that way. Also, we got a lot of emails. People are worried that we're going to stop our water cooler talk about segments that used to be rigid in Spoilerin time. But how do we want to address that for everyone?
Yeah, I sort of addressed it earlier in the show a little bit, but listen, we know we didn't get off to the solidest start with the Miami Vice focused rewatch, but we're all three committed to this rewatch now, as you will experience on this week's Spoiler in Time. And the water cooler talk has been a little absent just because shows weren't back and not all of us were watching them, but that is back today. So if you're a patron, get After Talk. If you're not a patron, maybe become a patron and get After Talk, and you'll see what I mean. So stick around for that. Our website is cordkillers.com. Our email address is cordkillers@gmail.com, and we are live at twitch.tv/Night Attack Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. We will talk to you next time. Oh, we're not done yet, Brian.
What? We have more?
Yeah, look at all those names scrolling by.
Tom, we just did so many hours of insights into the world of cord killing.
But you know why we were able to do all those hours? It's these people right here. These are some of the greatest people of all time.
Oh, better than Abraham Lincoln?
I believe he's on this list.
Better than Abraham Lincoln's ghost?
Yes.
Better than Richard Nixon?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hard to conceive, but I am not a crook or a liar when I tell you they are.
Why are all of these names either future or past presidents? It's really weird.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Presidents, everybody.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.